Let me just do a refresh on my LinkedIn just to be able to see. 1 second. Let me just see if a notification came up. We'll wait for a countdown for 1 moment. Let me bring up the comments here and let's see who we have. Great. Stefan, thanks for coming in. Lemuel, thanks for coming in. I appreciate the yups. We'd just love to know what city you're coming in from in the comment section. By the way, as we go through this, just leave in the comment section your questions. We'll ask questions to Anthony and happy to answer them live as we get towards the end of this. We're going to be on for about the next 30 minutes or so. And if it's okay, we'll get rocking and rolling. Ready to go? We are ready to go. Anthony, welcome to Dreamit Live. Thanks for spending the time with us. Thank you for having me. We appreciate it. It was fun to get ready for all this. So, RevZilla, can you give us a little bit of background? First, what is RevZilla? Where did the idea come from?
So RevZilla is in the motorcycle aftermarket. We sell primarily third-party goods, although we have some own brand. It's basically e-commerce. If you owned a motorcycle, everything else you'd buy from us: parts, accessories, apparel.
But not the motorcycle itself.
Not the motorcycle itself. You still buy that for a used bike from a third party or a dealership for a brand new bike.
Got it.
And that business, we founded that business.
What year?
2007, November.
2007.
And it grew to be the largest player, I believe, internationally in the e-commerce aftermarket online.
Got it. Aftermarket online. Power sports or all aftermarket online?
No, in power sports, yeah, in the motorcycle aftermarket. So we became the big dog in our space, the category killer, if you will.
Okay.
Gosh, and we did that, I want to say, within 8 years.
Okay.
It's now been 12 years since founding.
All right, and you did that without venture capital, correct?
We raised no money.
Yay, raised no money. Okay, so I want to talk about that. That is not, we talk with so many startups and founders, they come into Dreamit and they're like, success for us is if we can raise $10 million. Well, why is how much you can raise a model of your success? It's not about getting the big TechCrunch headline for how much you raised. That's not. It's all about revenue. It's like we always say, focus on revenue, not capital, and everything will take care of itself. But so what were you doing? Let's just talk about the start of RevZilla. What were you doing before RevZilla started? What was the thing right before it?
So I was kind of a nuts kid, and I started my career in technology in my teens. I'd been programming since I was about 15.
Right.
Comp Sci in college, didn't finish Comp Sci.
Right.
And right before
went to college where?
Drexel.
Philly
burbs, born and bred.
Yeah.
Philly for school, 3 co-ops.
Yep.
Went back to my first co-op, great local agency called WebLink. I think they're called Work Area Commerce now. But I caught the second wave of direct-to-consumer. So I was still in school in 2000, 2004, I graduate, and there's money finally starting to flow back into direct-to-consumer models online. And it's primarily big brands that want to go direct. So I got out of school, and they said, do you want to write code? And I said, I think I wasn't that good at that. And I think that's not my highest and best use, although I couldn't articulate it that well back then.
Right.
And I said, I want to try sales or project management. They said, you can try either, and if you suck, you can go back to writing code. And I said, great. So in about 3.5 years, I got a crash course in taking brands like a Vineyard Vines or an Oneida Flower or Smashbox Cosmetics. And at the time, the agency, we were also working with Speedo and Calvin Klein, building a direct-to-consumer experience while also building all the technological infrastructure behind the scenes that tied in with their ERP, fulfillment, supply chain. I mean, it was an amazing time post-bubble bursting when capital finally flowed.
Again, this is 2006,
This is 2004, 5, 6, and half a 7.
Okay. Right.
And I was good at it.
Okay.
Like it mattered. I didn't have to go back to writing code.
So how did you go from WebLink at the time to RevZilla? Where'd the idea come? Did you start it yourself?
So I was 26. I was out of school. I was single. I was living in the city. And at that time...
Wait, if people are streaming in from New York, this city doesn't mean New York City. Philadelphia, okay. Yeah.
I was a pretty tough kid. I steamrolled my parents a lot on a lot of things. They held their ground on very few. They realized he's going to be relentless. We got to let him go. Motorcycling was the only thing I got a hard no on ever. My parents said, we're going to cut you off at any point. If there's any tether of support that you would like from us, you cannot have a bike. I think my dad had a bike for like 6 months in college. And the story was, I want to sleep well at night, so you don't ever get to have a bike. And I'm really actually thankful they didn't let me ride in my teens.
Right.
I wasn't, I look back objectively, I was not responsible enough. And it is, there's a risk within the sport. So at 26, I pick out this used Ducati. It's this Monster Dark. It's a 2000. I want to buy this bike. I had a friend that rode. He's telling me about the industry. I said, well, I want a Japanese helmet. And I want the $1,000, or just call it expensive. I always say $1,000, but an expensive Italian leather. I'm a gear guy. I've always been nerdy.
Right.
And he goes, well, you can't get that stuff. You have to go to New York or go to the West Coast. I said, what about online? He goes, maybe a manufacturer's site overseas. Can't find it in the US. Wow. So we have this market that I looked at it and I said, well, I'm a new consumer in this market. I haven't even bought the bike yet. And I said, how can I not get the best stuff?
Right.
And that was really the impetus for, it's really funny, I ended up delaying the purchase of the bike, ended up putting some of that cash actually into starting the business. I mean, I got the bike very, very quickly, but I was a brand new rider, brand new industry, and really leveraged my specialty retail, e-commerce, technology background. And again, I had two close friends. We started the business together. We were all new riders. So it's like, cool, single guys, fun hobby, let's do this, but let's eat our own dog food. Let's build the mousetrap that we think is missing.
Got it. Got it. And I remember even because you and I met early on, like your original positioning, you picked another e-commerce website as part of your positioning. Could you talk about that?
So I'll tell you, so are you hinting at Zappos?
Yes, I'm hinting at Zappos.
Before that, it was Barney's.
Okay.
So we initially said we're going to be the Barney's of motorcycle gear.
Got it.
High touch, bespoke, premium, high-end, super enthusiast. If you just need a jacket, we're not for you.
Got
it. You want to like understand what the cloth feels like,
right,
come to us.
Right.
But then we read Delivering Happiness in 2008.
Yep.
And it changed our life. And we looked at it and we said, okay, we can be premium in our positioning, but let's build out a service level that actually reinforces this premium positioning. So now it's a premium experience wrapped around premium gear.
Okay.
So again, when you're just starting out, there's a lot of this for that. It's an easy way to quantify what are you doing, because nobody knew what a RevZilla was, but we said, we're the Zappos of RevZilla, of motorcycle gear. People said, okay, I get that. So that was the original thought. The original strategic pillars were tech-enabled with a big service component to create a great user experience. And we competed on experience.
Okay. So it's you, a couple of founders, you needed some gear, you needed some space, no capital, no cash. I mean, how did you get it off the ground? How did you get things started? Because that's always the hardest, is like getting something started when you're at zero.
So my two friends I had worked with at one point they were both actually at WebLink. That's where we overlapped. They were young developers. I was no longer writing code. We did the whole business for 25 or 30 grand. I threw in 15,000 bucks. I paid our rent. We all moved in together. Maxed out a credit card for 10K. I think the number really was $30,000. And we started working on it in July of that year. We launched November 7th or November 14th. So if you run that timeline, how many months of keeping the lights on? Our initial startup costs were ready. So it was rack space for $1,800 a month.
No Amazon Web Services then, right?
We had $1,200 in rent, $1,500 in the apartment, which I fit out with like all IKEA stuff because it was bombed out and depleted. We had this theme of just like terrible warehouses till we finally got to the Philly Navy Yard, but that was in 2013.
Right.
But we moved in together and we said, okay, if we were doing this business and we weren't us, the capital outlay would be technology, the platform, hiring an agency or building a tech team. My two co-founders were heavily writing code. I had enough creative chops to where I could bring in a designer and work on front end and experience. Between the three of us, the big bootstrap was exhausting intellectual capital before we needed real outside, real money to do it. Launched in November and got cash flow positive pretty quickly.
Wow.
Which was an anomaly and a blessing.
Okay. All right, so we'll talk about the anomaly and blessing. Just to remind people, thanks for tuning in to our webcast today. We're streaming live to you. Anthony Bucci from RevZilla, one of the co-founders of RevZilla, who bootstrapped it from zero to exit. We're going to talk about that. If you're just joining us, please, in the comment section, please leave what city you're coming in from. If you have questions as we go through that, list your questions in the comment section. We're going to leave about 10 or 15 minutes at the end to answer questions and have Anthony answer questions. So thank you for joining us. There was one note I did see. Thank you, Stefan said, correction, Anthony's sound is echoing a bit, but that was like 10 minutes ago. Hopefully, we're sitting a little further back, so our mics aren't as close to each other, but thanks for letting us know that. Get away from you. I will get away from you. So you started this. You were cash flow positive pretty quickly, probably not paying yourselves a lot, but cash flow positive. So did you know, you and your founders, did you know that you wanted to bootstrap this? Did you even use the term like, let's bootstrap it? Were you thinking in that mindset and mentality in those early days? Did you call it bootstrapping?
Probably within the first few years, we knew we were bootstrappers.
Right.
We knew at the time, it's really funny. I'd read some VC blogs. One of my co-founders, Matt, had spent more time following Paul Graham, and some of his musings. But I mean, from the standpoint of looking at it, it was, we need to gain customers, we need to gain revenue, which for us, I mean, if you look at the business too, it's execution risk, it's not market risk. We can talk about that more too. But it's like we didn't have a contrarian view of something needed. Our contrarian view was motorcycling is selling itself short because everybody's trying to be the Walmart of motorcycle gear. No one needs this stuff. It's all passion driven. Be experiential. Be the premium destination, right? The Barneys. That was the contrarian thought where we could build out this thing that we knew we wanted to see that didn't exist. But if you look at that, I mean, through the lens of e-commerce and even specialty e-commerce, it was a one-to-many. Now, there were some things like media that we did which were 0-to-ones, but the business itself, it was a e-commerce business with an established market going online. And we said we should be able to capture demand that's out there. And through the use of technology and even just some rudimentary early SEO and marketing chops, we were able to drive revenue pretty quickly. I mean, to the point where we launched November 7th of 14, and by Valentine's Day, we were cash flow positive, which was, again, don't put founder salaries in it, right? And if you really want to do that calculation, what does it cost to replace you?
Right.
But without paying ourselves, I remember we took our first money out of the business May of that same year. And I mean, it was like a couple $1,000 check just to keep the lights on.
Got it. So you weren't paying, in the beginning, you're not paying yourselves anything. You're paying rent, you're whatever that's factored in.
We had one part-time employee that was coming in and like merchandising
customer
products.
Service or something?
No, we were all the phone calls.
Right.
People would call, this is Anthony, and what can I help you with? And we learned a ton. We talked to every customer. We didn't spend $1 on marketing until we were about 15 to 18 months old.
Wow.
So we drove $1.4 million in revenue that first year just through SEO. I mean, it's really funny.
$1.4 million in your first year of top line.
Of top line revenue, probably running like 3 or 4 points to the bottom line.
Right.
We were able to drop ship. We leveraged drop ship networks.
Right.
I mean, the first year we were 95.5 drop shipped to things we had. And the only things we had to work off of were stocking order inventory we bought to open up certain brands, and then returns that we would like have like in a pile, and we were like, oh my god, we have one of these. Oh my god, we can sell our own one of these. But yeah, part-time employee. Our first full-time employee we probably hired about a year into the business. But I mean, Matt, Nick, and I, to bridge back, we took every phone call, and when something needed to be escalated in customer service, it was like, let me get a supervisor for you. And like, Matt, this guy's being really unreasonable. I don't know. You need to give him something. Okay, I'm going to get my supervisor for you. Here. So you have 3 founders taking every call.
That's great.
And very quickly it became, we even knew early on, it was Nick who is the best coder of the 3 of us, right? I wrote no RevZilla code ever.
Right.
Matt wrote a lot of code in the beginning. Nick, objectively, Matt would say this was a better developer than Nick was.
Right.
So then it became Matt and I taking the phone calls. It was like, okay, what's pushing the business forward faster is we need a customer service system. We need to build out some more use case specific infrastructure on our own.
Right.
So then it just became, we're manning the phones, and Nick would be the third in line of phone ringing. But I mean, it was wild. You're in your underwear, you're in your living room. I actually lived next door because I had just gotten married and was like having a child. And I would go to the apartment. I mean, within 6 months, I lived next door.
Right.
And you're literally answering emails, answering phone calls. And when no one's calling us, we're merchandising products, putting them on the website, building catalogs.
And just to remind you, for those that are just tuning in, thank you for joining us. Anthony Bucci talking about the ascent of RevZilla. Just a couple things to remind people of the time. So this is like 2008, 2009, 7, right in there. So let's just remind people what it was like, because it's different today. And we're going to talk about things today, right? No Amazon Web Services. You were using Rackspace. No Magento. No Shopify. I mean, you wrote an e-commerce engine yourselves,
Ruby Rails 0.7, I think, was like the first. Right.
So to think about when people are like, that doesn't sound that hard. That shit didn't exist back then. None of it. So interesting. So as you're talking about, I want to talk about some of the metrics. Could you maybe just give us the first 1 or 2 years? Because I want to talk about it from a VC angle. You know, you said by the following year you did about 1.2, 1.5 million top line. You're bringing a little bit to the bottom. Just those first couple of years, what were some of your high point metrics?
Sure, absolutely. So we had 6 weeks of 2007, and I'll never forget, we did $65,000 in business, 70 grand in business top line in those 6 weeks.
Right. So all through that hot, Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Right. I mean, we started at Thanksgiving, so we caught none of it. It was really. Agree. There. So then you're in 2008, we do 1.4 million top line for the year. If you asked me back then how much business we were going to do the first year, I would have said $10 million. Like, you look at it, and it was just the first 3 years of the business were so excruciatingly slow. But in hindsight, it's like we were at revenue so quickly, but it still was. So 2008, first full year, 1.4 to 1.6 million, would take returns out of that. The second year was 3.2 million.
Second year, 3.2. So you doubled, a little over doubled.
6.4. So we double. So that was the first 3 years of the business were 1.5, 3, 6. Year 4 was 2011. That was the year that we survived. We went from 6.2 to 17. And that was the year we all looked at each other.
I thought surviving you were going to say dipped.
No.
You tripled.
Nothing kills faster than success. We were makers. We were not managers. My previous life, I had a big title and a decent comp that allowed me to roll up some cash to put towards this and could allow me to have a burn rate that could extend to take this risk. But I'd never managed people before. Like, very honestly, we went in 2011, we went from like 3 employees, probably like 25. I mean, we scaled really quickly.
Wow.
And that's when I can remember paying off the credit cards 3 times every day. Matt was doing that. Me working on marketing, us looking at recruiting. I mean, at that point, we had no financial help on staff. We were having somebody close our books at the end of every month, and we had no headlights on, right? So we're just trying to chase it.
Right.
So yeah, like, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But yeah, the first 3 years were excruciatingly slow. 11 popped. And then from there, I mean, the growth curve was 16 million, 32 million, 59 million, 85 million, 115. And that takes us through 15. So it was just like, I mean, those last 4 years, adding $30 million in top line a year, it was just nuts. It was wild.
So you're doing over 100 million in revenue. So I have to ask, I would assume there's a couple of VCs that ride motorcycles. I mean, at any point, did you ever think about VC? Did VCs approach you? Hey, I see what you're doing. Can I invest? What are you up to? It doesn't look like you've taken cash. Can you talk a little bit about how that made you feel, how you thought about it?
So I remember it was actually the day I met you at that Founder Factory in 2009. We're looking at it and we're just watching people raising money. And I remember having a conversation. It's funny because I have a pretty good memory for the early conversations. I don't remember who I was talking to. And really homing in on everybody here is so excited about raising money. It is like, that's not the goal. The goal here is to build a company.
Build a business. Right.
And we figured that out pretty early on. I mean, I definitely got introduced to Chris Fralick, who became a friend and added a ton of help along the way at first round.
We had him here at Dreamit last week for the founders. He was terrific.
Back in the day. And then Chris was like, you should meet with Josh. And I went in to meet with Josh to talk about, in my mind, I was going to learn everything I could from Josh about his experience building all the categories in third-party retail at half.com.
So Josh Kaufman,
sorry.
First round capital,
And Josh, at some point, we're on his couch, and he's like, well, are you going to pitch? Are you raising money? I was like, oh, no, I don't think we are. It was like the worst use of Josh's 30 minutes that day.
Wow.
But I left, and I was like, thank you. I appreciate the insight. And he was probably just like, WTF, who is this kid?
Right.
So that was like kind of the naivety back then. Of very early on, it was, we don't think we're raising. And then the conversation, we started getting rolling. I remember meeting with you one day with some other friends here at Philly. Daniel Earlbaum came down. And I remember at some point the conversations was, if you had $2 more million, what does that buy you? And we kind of looked at each other, and this is probably in the first 18 months. We said,
First 18 months.
Like, I don't know. We don't know what we would do with it. Right now, we're just trying to build systems to capture some of this demand or capture the operational aspect.
Right.
You know, you ever hear the old analogy, fire in motion, right? So it's like you start out and you're just moving forward, building the business. And now you have customers. Now you have to lay down cover fire.
Right.
So this first few years, we're trying to figure out how to grow as fast as we could, but build a lot of things that allowed us to not break our brand promise. Like, we were really good about, we have to deliver on our brand promise and be consistent and not let a customer down ever in the early years. So to that point, back to how does venture capital play? Through the course of the business, every 6 months, we got pretty good at having a conversation of like, what can't we do right now because we're thinly capitalized?
Right.
What would we invest in? What would we do? Where would we expand to? Could we grow faster? Would we throw money at marketing? Can we not hire someone that costs $500,000 a year that knows way more than we know about X subject that is completely a strategic decision for us at this moment because we have not raised? The further we went in without raising, the more we understood, the more we self-educated. And truthfully, guys like you, guys like Fralick, guys like Bookspan, guys like Schlesinger at Five Below, we learned about the cost of capital.
Right.
And when you start to make that choice, you are signing up for a trajectory that is going to disproportionately focus on growth that typically ends in an acquisition or going public, but most of the time it's an acquisition.
Right.
And we looked at it and we said, we don't know enough about what... We know this industry is not huge. It was like a $2.5 billion industry. And we're not sure. We got to a place in saying we can do most of the things that we want to do. We're not sure we're growing 100%, if not more. One year we grow 180%. Could we move faster? And do we know enough that the cost of the capital and changing the dynamic was worth it? And we ultimately, whether we had the conversation concertedly or loosely a few times a year, kept agreeing, we still don't need to raise money.
So, but you know, in all of that, the one thing you didn't say that you hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, like, well, why should I sell you 20% of my business for $5 million? Why, you know, my pie is worth more than that. But did that ever go, that was part of your calculus or not? You never mentioned that. You said, like, what will we do with the cash? You know, and it puts us on a trajectory, but not like, why am I selling a piece of this?
Yeah, the selling a piece, right? So really early on, we were exposed to enough folks that, you know, the grape watermelon analogy, a slice of the watermelon, all the grape, that didn't bug us. It was more, you know, I hate to say it this way because I don't want to, I'm really going to show my bias here, but it was purity in decision making. Like, once we got off the ground and realized that we have all the decision making, all the flexibility. We still retain all the outs because nobody has a blocking right. We didn't raise. We didn't put ourselves, like the companies that I've worked with in the last decade that have raised, it's like, you're raising and immediately focusing on the next milestone, focus on your next raise.
Right.
And it's great if you're in an industry that can support that. But we just looked at this and we said, we could build, I don't think this business can support $1 billion business. I don't think that even somewhere in the middle, I wouldn't have articulated it this way, but I knew by year 3 or 5 that a VC could not make a bet on our company that he or she could justify to the investment committee that RevZilla could support returning the whole fund, right? Because early stage VCs, they need to make a bet that they can support and saying, if this hits, it's an experiment, but it could return the whole fund. We got so far into the place of it really became, do we need growth capital, right? That was different. And then it became, do we need PE, right? Can we de-risk and double down? Which was a later on conversation. But early stage VC was a very easy no within a few years.
So end of the day, just to kind of move it along a little bit, and again, if you're just joining us, please put in the comments section where you're from so we can keep track of that. It's not coming up on comments for me, but we appreciate everybody joining us today. We have Anthony Bucci from RevZilla, founder of RevZilla. We'll talk about it all the way to exit and keep going through it. My next question, I think I know, are you happy you bootstrapped?
10 out of 10 times.
Okay, 10 out of 10 times?
Yeah, 100 out of 100 times.
That's awesome. Would you do it again?
Yes. You know what? So I would predicate the decision to bootstrap or not based on, I would really look through the lens of speed to market. Right. Like I kept coming back to speed to market. There's a great first round review that was written. It might say, speed to market wins. I forget the title of it, but I really looked at it and said, ultimately, the largest prizes are heavily competed for. And if you look at the trajectory of a business that cannot burn capital to get there faster, we weren't one of those businesses, but if I was starting another business that, whether it was execution risk in a big enough market or it was full on market risk, that was more of an experiment. We're not sure if people will really want this. I would blend it probably with, I either need to move faster or I was unsure about the experiment. I would probably blend it with other people's money.
Okay,
but skip every round that I could.
Okay, skip every round that you could, bootstrap for as long as you could. Do you think there's so it sounds like a lot of pros, any cons, any things where you and other co-founders at RevZilla thought, shit, we can't do this. We just don't have the cash. That there was negative sides to bootstrapping, or was it all, butterflies and great things?
It's definitely not. We couldn't figure out why nobody cared and why TechCrunch never called, right? So it's part of the value, right? If you I look at VC these days, the capital's cheap. It's service business, right? And we've seen first round do it. We've seen Andreessen Horowitz do it, right? That's what Dreamit's doing. It's you're bringing value to the table. That's a support structure that adds the ability to go faster, but the ability, hopefully, to get more things right more quickly. So we didn't have access. I look at the first 3 years of RevZilla, and I will tell you, if we had raised some money, it would have been a forcing function for us to do certain things in probably a more concerted manner more quickly, feel confident testing more. I bet we probably could have gotten to the $20 million run rate, maybe in 18 months, if we had folks that had seen consumer businesses go faster more quickly. Now, some of the organic stuff, like RevZilla TV, which took a couple years to spin up, some of the other ways in which we kind of, I'll say, muddled through it, the way we were maybe more thoughtful about culture and the way we hired, it wasn't growth at all costs. I'll also see this, right? Early on, I think that I see companies raise capital and they immediately end up out there and it creates a bit of an allure. It adds to the hiring brand. You know as well as I do that once you have product market fit, it's all about team and scale, team and strategy. And then the CEO's job is don't run out of money, set a vision, hire the team, recruit the team, sell the dream. And I think that if we could have, if we had raised capital, you have the ability to potentially get your name out faster, hire differently, not have to muddle through certain things. You might be able to scale it more quickly. As a founder.
Here's an interesting thing, by the way. Did you have competitors that launched against you that had raised venture and you're like, oh crap, here come 2 or 3 more people and you just kept blowing them out of the water?
So I'll tell you, the big dog in the space was a company, Motorcycle Superstore. They had investors, but they didn't have traditional VC. I think there was some family money at play. When we started our business, he was probably this is a gentleman, Don, great guy, owned this business. He was about $40 or $50 million. They spun out of, I think, dealerships in Oregon.
Wait, they took in $40 to $50 million?
No, top line. Sorry,
top line. Sorry, okay.
There's another company, Motorsport, which is now owned by Backcountry. They had raised from Sequoia in '99. And that was wild to see Sequoia play in this space. But I mean, '99 was a very different time for specialty retail. So everybody, when we started, was better capitalized. There were a ton of companies selling direct. but ready. So I don't get a feather in my cap for this one. We had the benefit of timing.
Right.
We started on the heels of the Great Recession or right into it. So the whole industry, unfortunately, it was really a shame because there was a lot of people that were impacted negatively by it at a personal level, but at a business level, everybody's in belt tightening mode.
Right.
Everybody's going, whoa, motorcycling used to be 1.2 million new units a year. The year we started, it went from that number to like 450,000. The whole industry's rocked. We were three kids we were in our mid to late 20s in a living room that were a dark horse that snuck in when everybody wasn't paying any attention to us with a different model. And by the time everybody caught the breath 18 months later, we had a better model. We're off to the races and capturing a ton of market. So it was a perfect storm of timing for us too.
Okay, it's cool. Do you think bootstrapping is right for every entrepreneur, every business, everyone? Or where's it right? Where's it wrong? Because, for instance, I know you're doing a lot of advising, a lot of coaching and leadership guidance to a lot of startups today, right? Are some of them venture-backed? Are all of them bootstrapped? When's the right time to think about maybe not bootstrapping, or where do you think it applies?
So I said it earlier. My advice to any entrepreneur now would be skip every round you can. Exhaust your intellectual capital before you have to start burning someone else's
capital. We talk about that all the time, right? Burn up your intellectual capital. Burn your brain cells before you start burning dollars. And if anybody's international, euros, yen, or wherever it's from. But yeah.
I think it's a trade-off, right? I think it's a constant cost-benefit analysis of what can't we do today if we aren't moving fast enough. Is someone that is better capitalized going to blow by us?
Right.
So in a highly competed for space, with multiple points of competition. I mean, unless you can play the cards really close to the vest and build fast with no one watching, I mean, in a lot of spaces today, even the companies that I have invested in, they're in big spaces that as soon as scale, or at least product market fit is starting to be achieved, you're on everybody's radar, and now there's somebody that's going to, with better distribution, better capitalized, is going to knock you off and come after you. So how do you not try to, reach escape velocity faster than they are if speed really, really matters? I think you have to know how fast you have to go. You have to know your market, the size of it, who your competitive set are. Not that you should be constantly walking in the rearview mirror, but how fast do you need to go? I think where you're at from a headroom standpoint and how fast you should be pushing growth, I mean, that is founding team, that is CEO, that is core tenet of the job. And I think that informs your decision to decide how you want to be capitalized. And knowing the downside, knowing the ups and downs of what that means if you're going to go out and raise money. I mean, I'm working with a handful of companies right now. I'm trying to think the folks that have raised, a lot of their choices move slower, which I wouldn't recommend for them. Or if they're in a personal position where there's no path to cash flow neutral or cash flow positive more quickly, they're actually running a true experiment that to get to product market fit, it's going to take a lot of time and money to almost test. I think the smart thing to do is not go into $500,000 in debt as a person saying, this is market risk. I'm not sure if people will actually want this or what flavor of this we're actually going to pivot into. I think there's a big case for raising some other people's money and doing that in a way that doesn't crush you and be an albatross for the rest of your life. If you said, I want to own the whole grape to have all my outs like Anthony did. Right. But then all of a sudden you end up with an albatross. I think you have to be really thoughtful about that. Okay,
and then the other thing, I don't know if you've experienced this and seen it in some of the entrepreneurs you're advising today, is where sometimes money makes you sloppy. Right? I'm a big fan of necessity as the mother of invention. So by not raising a lot of cash and keeping sharp, you see it sometimes dulls the senses. And I just think about, look, if you need capital because you're building a biotech, you're discovering the next molecule, you're doing some medical device, at some point you'll need capital. I think for not all companies, but many companies. But again, where you have to be careful how much you raise, because if you raise too much, you get sprawl. You just get sloppy. Because you're just not focused enough.
I would agree with that.
Okay. So as you talk about RevZilla, you talk about 2011, and in these growth years, you crossed $100 million in revenue. Was it a smooth ascent? Were there bumps along the way? You hear about every startup. You hear it's a roller coaster. It's the ups and downs. Was it a smooth, or were there bumps along the way?
So top and bottom line were really smooth. And if you look at that as half of the main scoreboard, the other 2 points are how happy is my team, right? It's are we recruiting the right talent and keeping them engaged, attracting and retaining the right talent, right? And if you look at our customer sentiment, are we building a brand, right? If that's the four, that was my magic numbers. Top and bottom line, brand reputation, hiring brand, right? And culture. It was pretty smooth and up and to the right. We got a lot of things right. And part of that, I think, was the benefit of doing a lot of the early things organically, setting a really strong foundation that then we could build tall on top of. But the ups and downs, I mean, I identified with the business. Oh my gosh, you can go watch the videos that I was in. I mean, I did the classic thing of like, I became the business, just like, it was like, I am one with the force.
Right.
So then, if we're having a great month, bopping around the office.
Right.
If we're not having a great month or a great quarter, or if we're really concerned about something, or we're concerned that we lost a key, a talented person, or we missed an opportunity, or, that rocks you. So it's like our ascent was like this, right? If you say, how was it?
Right.
Did we face existential crises at any point to where, and there were definitely moments in this business where I lost sleep.
Right.
Early, middle, and end for me. But as far as profitable revenue growth, curing all, that was a pretty, looking back, it's like, I would tell first-time founder me, with the perspective I have now, it's like, oh my God, shut up. It's like you had so little to worry about.
Right.
You were almost spoiled to a point. But what I didn't have to know that was the experience. So our thought process was constantly trying to level ourselves up to stay ahead of the demands of the business, to know enough about what we didn't know. There was that, Andy Grove's book, Only the Paranoid Survive. I was such a paranoid CEO.
Right.
Hopefully not in a way that impacted my people negatively, but there's that old saying, it's like, if you're worried, you don't have to worry. If you stop worrying, you should be worried.
Right.
Like I very much worried so much about what I didn't know because I couldn't fathom letting the team or the business down. And I really think that was how, to the credit of my co-founders too, they did the same thing. And our CFO, who started as our senior accounting manager, Dave Price, this was a shout out. I mean, we really went from maker to manager to executive and did the work to scale ourselves ahead of something that was growing faster than we thought it.
Wow.
That it surprised us.
Okay, great.
I'll stop there.
So no, that's great. That's great. I want to go a little further. Just a couple more numbers. So we know you were doing over 100 million in revenue.
In 15, we crossed the barrier.
Okay, 15. So how many people? So you started, there was the three of you. You grew to about 250 people?
Yeah, when I transitioned out, it was about, I want to say it was 250, maybe 260.
One location, or how many distribution centers?
So we had Vegas distribution, we had Philadelphia distribution, which is on the Navy Yard, but down the street, 3/10 of a mile from our headquarters. Probably 190, maybe 170 in our main headquarters on the Philly Navy Yard. It's still there today.
How many shipments a day, or some other just interesting statistics? Like,
oh my gosh.
How many UPS trailers left the back end?
Oh wow, how many orders, how many shipments went? We did over 100,000 square foot of warehouse. It's mezzanine now. We built all the systems to do that as well. It was tremendous volume. You're doing, I remember Black Friday's over $1 million a day. You're doing consistently $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 in revenue a day. How many orders? Thousands and thousands, 5,000, 7,000 orders a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you grew from nothing, three guys where you're like, hi, Anthony, can I take your order? Or answer your questions, to 250 people, $1 million on a Black Friday kind of day.
Yeah.
How do you feel, and you bootstrapped the whole thing, you're not taking outside funding. How do you feel you grew as a leader? What leadership lessons did you learn along the way? Do you feel that you and the team leveled up along the way?
I do. I hit it from a couple prongs. So when we started the business, I would say I wasn't a very good leader. I was a very, I think like many people in their 20s, I shouldn't even say that. I'll just speak to me. Like selfish. When you start, right, you're at a stage of life. I didn't have kids yet. I wasn't married yet. It was like I was coming off my other career and you're just focused on me. And I think that the big unlock from a leadership standpoint for me was understanding that the outputs of things that were harder in my universe of trying to work within the team, recruit and work with my co-founders were all things that were broken about me. They were my blind spots. So for me, I had the benefit of a book changed my life. What got you here won't get you there. It's like 20 most it says talented people. If you're smart, you can have a long arc, but everyone's going to be limited by their ability to interpersonally communicate and work on a team. That's typically the limiter. Doesn't matter what your horsepower is.
Right.
So I read that and it focused me inward, and I just kind of became obsessed with what's broken about me that I can tune, which if I can fix, it's going to be, one, to set a great example, but two, an unlock for my team and working with me.
Right, so force multiplier.
Force multiplier.
Yeah.
And then how can I help my team understand how they're wired? We did Myers-Briggs, we did disc profiles. I read a ton of books online, I still do, where it's like if you can unlock yourself and know what you're great at and what you suck at, maximize your superpowers, hire complementary for your weaknesses. Don't try to make something you're a 2 out of 5.
Right.
Say, I know I'm a 2 at it. I need to make sure we don't break our leg on that,
right,
or we don't fall in the chasm because I suck at that. But we need to backfill in a way that's complementary to me to make sure we always have that great perspective. I also had the benefit, I'll give you credit to guys like you. Some of the guys I mentioned earlier,
right,
I had enough, I built a network. I had no board. We had no board. we didn't have formal advisors. We had friends and mentors
Right.
that said, "You're not
built
assholes.
a great advisor network.
You're committed to this. We
Right.
think you're a good person,
Uh-huh.
and we know you're serious about it."
Right.
I was never bashful about asking for help,
Right.
and I found that I find it now. There's a helper high. People, if they appreciate
helper
the
high.
helper high, you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
people wanted to help us. Just like I want to help people now.
Right.
It makes you feel good when you're able to offer somebody something. A light bulb goes off, and they're like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. I'll take that and run with it. I think that a lot of these bootstrapping conversations, capitalizing conversations, when to exit the business conversations, we made such better decisions because I was using my hit the red button and ask the audience Regis so often over
Right,
drinks
right.
or I'll buy you dinner. I'd love to
Right.
pick your brain. I've never hired or managed an executive at that level that I don't know what they do.
Right.
It's amazing. Ready? So I guess that part of it, I'd say you can't do it in a vacuum.
Right.
I know people that say, I want to figure it out. They're more the personality type where they get such joy of doing the Rubik's Cube on their own. I look at it as like, hey, I don't need to be the one that completes it.
Right.
I much rather get the leverage out of what's the most efficient path to getting to the right answer.
And I remember a couple of those conversations along the way. I don't know if you remember this one. I kind of actually remember where I was driving. You called me. You said, there's a bunch of M&A, and I want to talk about that. But,
Sure.
and I'm thinking of maybe hiring a banker. Can you help me get smart real quick? What are the 3 or 4 things I need to know? Here's the person I'm talking to. And you did that incessantly. You'd always surround yourself with people that were like, I'm not sure, can you help me get smart fast? Which is great. Not everybody has that characteristic. It tells me, by the way, you find that great CEOs have tremendous self-confidence because they'll tell people like, I don't know this, can you help me get smart? And if you lack confidence, people don't do that because they're afraid. They're like, oh, people aren't going to think I'm great.
When I started out, I thought I had to have all the answers.
Right.
If I had have all the answers, I was the genius and everybody's my helper.
Right.
It totally pivoted for me in year 3 or 4 where I was like, my job is to make sure the best ideas win and break ties. Right? There's a great saying. It's like the Knights of the Round Table of King Arthur. It was a round table, but there was a throne in the back. And that was like the job is to surface the best ideas and then to break the ties. With regard to what you just said, it's like that same conversation. I called Brock from Pets 360, Brock Lederer. I called Eric at August Capital. I called Dan Mary at Stripes Group. I called Doug Alexander. I used the network I had built in Philly of people that knew I appreciated their help. I said, I'm not going to be bashful. You take 10 minutes. Tell me the things that help me see around the corner of what are the inputs and outputs for having a great banker look like.
Right.
And before I even get there, help me qualify and thinking about the right way.
Right.
And it's like you can get your knowledge base to go from 0 to a 7 so quickly. You still have to figure it out, but it's like a running start. I used to tell my people on my team, put a bookend on this. It's you have permission to not know. I'm going to tell you what I don't know. You have permission. I'd rather you say I don't know than say to bluff at it because there's high cost to bluffing at things that are really important.
Okay, so I want to be careful on time, probably another 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up. Again, if you're just joining us and you're probably already there, please put where you're from in the comment section. Really helps track so we understand who's on the streams with us. Again, we're on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and I think Twitter Live at the same time, so it's great to see that information. We really appreciate all of our time with Anthony Bucci today from RevZilla. I want to talk next about exits. So you exited. We said you grew from 0 to exit, 0 to about 250 people. When you exited, was that your first acquisition offer? And if it wasn't, what happened previously? And how did you think about that as a founding team?
The last few years, we had a cacophony of interest.
A cacophony,
of inbound interest.
Okay.
No, I mean, we're hearing it from the PE guys, private equity guys constantly.
How about other specialty retailers?
Some specialty retailers.
Right.
We'd actually heard from Cycle Gear and the parent, the PE behind it, before we decided to do a market check. We knew they were interested in us. Before that, I mean, I don't want to get a C&D or get called to the carpet here, but Backcountry looked at us. 2013, we loved those guys.
Right.
They made a real offer. At the time, it was Liberty Interactive, right? We turned them down. Love Jill. Love Jonathan, who's running it now. Shout out to Jonathan and Jill. We learned a lot from that process with you guys. It took about 6 months. It was excruciating. We were scared to death. We're like, these people do this for a living. We're going to get hosed. We figured it out. Before that, there was a company called Action Village out of Chicago. It was the first one that we flew in, met with the CEO. I mean, that was probably, that was 2011.
But what was going through your mind when you're sitting there trying to decide? You've bootstrapped. Do we sell? Don't we sell? Do we keep going? People are kind of waving whatever at you. How did you think about that? Why did you turn them down? Because you had nobody to answer. Like you said, you had no board. It was just, the three of you pretty much could make any decision you wanted to.
And so I'll preface this by saying, I love the business. I loved building the business. I love the team. But I've always, and I tend to be emotional. I have to hire all people that are more pragmatic around me
Right.
because I tend to be too optimistic and too enthusiastic. I know that's my blind spot. But I've always been really good at everything has a life cycle. I didn't know if RevZilla's life cycle was going to be 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, or 100 years from now it'll outlive me. I have no idea. But the opportunity, the time, my time there, I was always looking at it through the lens of, you're building this, and at some point you never know when the opportunity might arise to do things differently that could change your landscape, change the choices that you have, allow you and your team to be rewarded for the effort. So my view, and I picked this up along the way, I can't remember who said it, but our view is if we're going to do something inorganic that takes us out of the driver's seat and changes the risk profile, we need to be compensated for our confident future prospects. And that's us and the team going to the pay window, changing the capitalization structure. But so with both of those deals, we looked at it and said, we're growing, for the backcountry deal, we said, we're growing 85% this year. We are doing, that was the year I think we did $59 million. They offered us a pretty big number, but we didn't think we were going to go from 80% growth to 0% growth the next year. Right. We knew what our EBITDA was. We knew what our bottom line looked like. And we said, we're going to be worth dramatically more than, it's like you have to, if you really want us to stop and change and let you put your hands on this, then you have to make us and everybody that's with us really comfortable up front. Right. And that means, I mean, you could really quantify that saying by it's the right number with the right terms attached. Right. And maybe the shortest answer is we never saw anything that, until the very end, we never saw anything that said that would be worth changing the risk profile. Right. Interesting, because I've heard other people describe it as, I heard somebody years ago say to me, the example they used was, you need to give me a number that makes me faint. And what you just did, you made me a little lightheaded, but I'm not fainting. Yeah. So why would I give up the business and give up control? Yeah. So interesting. So you exited. That was 2 or 3 years ago now? February 23rd, 2016. February 2016, so a little over 3 years ago. All right, so you're no longer with RevZilla full time. What's it like for you? A couple things. You thinking about your next adventure. Where are you spending your time these days? I know you are not idle hands. So no, and I'll tell you, in the time since I transitioned out of RevZilla, which was about 10 months after we exited, and that's a whole nother conversation for another time. Yep. But it was time for me to transition out. The hardest year was the first year, because I missed a lot about the business, and I probably was the least productive. And I was like, I'm George Costanza. I'm in sweatpants every day, and nobody knows this, and I want to like jump off a bridge. Right. And I'll never forget that first Thanksgiving. About a year later, my wife's like, "You're not happy." I was like, "I'm not happy at all." She's like, "What are you going to do differently in 2018?" And I love that she pressed me. And I said, "I think I'm just going to get back to work." And she was like, "Doing what?" I was like, "I'll figure it out." Right. And so I have slowly and surely ramped up since then. To where I sit on a handful of boards. Sometimes I invest in companies. My favorite thing to do is work with founding teams. Typically at around, they have customers, they have revenue, about scaling. It's so much fun when people are going through the transition of like maker to manager to exec. Right. But yeah, it's interesting. The analogy I use is really hard to write your second album, right? And for me, the opportunity cost of just jumping in because I'm in between, my kids are young. I'm enjoying being around, getting to raise them a little bit right now. And there's like this week's insane. There's no shortage of business things going on. Right. But I guess I'm putting a premium on the optionality, which is I still control my schedule, because my view is, I don't know if this goes for bigger companies. I know startup CEO. I'm very binary. I'm bad at compartmentalizing. And when I was there, it was blinders. Everything came second. Right. And right now, to do that on a whim or to do it because I just want to do another business, it's going to be a hard gravitational pull that pulls me back in. I expect it to happen. Right. I just am not rushing the timeline. Okay. Well, and what would you do? Another startup? Yeah. Okay. Like in a heartbeat. Right market, right time, right team. I would not want to be a sole co-founder. I'd want to work with somebody probably in a technical role that would be a great complement for me. And what's interesting about this, I love consumer businesses. I want to build something. It's fun to build things that people fall in love with. Like I respect the B2B side. Yeah. But that's different. It's it's easier to identify your customers. Maybe it's closer to execution risk than market risk. But man, when you can invent something that people say, I love what you guys do, right. I'm a little spoiled. It's amazing. So let me ask you one more question. And then if you have questions, if the audience has questions, just please put them in the comments. If you can, when you put it in the comments again, just list what city you're from. That would be great. And we have a few questions that are already queued up that I'll take in a minute. The last question I had for you, I know you're doing just a little bit of angel investing. Yep. What are you looking at today? And more importantly, what are the attributes you're looking at, either of the business, the founders, like what turns you on, what turns you off? So I see a bunch of stuff. And it's really funny. I get a bunch of decks. I get a handful of decks like every week. But I'm not excited about chasing deals. I'm excited about meeting people that I want to work with. Okay. So what turns me on is it's a value system, founder market fit, people that want to solve a problem that they have for themselves, and people that there's some founders I meet that they know, call it stage of life, but they're just at a place where if you ask them, they almost would represent that they already know everything. Like they're just so confident. And I think it's stage of life. I think it's part of a personality trait. And there are other founders I meet, it's amazing to bring smart people around or experienced people like you, because I'd love to just be able to pick your brain. And you find yourself in these great engaging conversations where you had so much joy kind of helping somebody see the full canvas, and they got so much value of taking things that they can apply. So with regard to angel investing, the most, I maybe once or twice have written a check for a company I don't spend a lot of operational time with. The ideal for me is I'm going to take a board independent seat. I'm going to come on as an active advisor. Me writing a check is actually because I believe in the business, but it's also a signal that I have skin in the game with you. They're fun moments. And that's that's kind of my calculus, where I still look at business model, market, timing. But for me, none of that shit matters if I don't sit there with somebody and say, oh, I really want to spend more time with you. Okay,
cool. Let me open it up for questions. If you have questions, please leave it in the comments. Whether it's for, well, it should really be for Anthony today, founder of RevZilla. I'm going to take the first question just coming up here. Anthony, what are we kind of hit on one or two of them. What are some of your favorite go-to books? What's on your reading list? Or what should be on founders' reading list?
It's really funny too. A bunch of stuff. I just wrote a blog post, anthonybucci.com. If you want to see it, I read a bunch of stuff this spring. But I mean, my favorite go-to is like, if I look at the canvas of if you have a business, what's going to change your life? What got you here won't get you there. Identifying your own blind spots. Something like a Traction or a Dalio Principles or a Hard Thing. The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is Horowitz. They're amazing. I read a lot of.
You mentioned earlier about Jerry
Colonna's new books. It's an amazing leadership, but introspective read about really debugging yourself. I mean, his basic premise is you want to be the best leader you can, be the best human you can. And if you want to, what was the other premise? Shoot, I'm blanking on it. But there's a few things in that one that are really great, where there's a lot of like tactical, here's my framework. Jerry's book is Fix What's Broken with You. There's no easy path. And in tune, you'll make your people better. I'm trying to think what else is on the
And on your website, on anthonybucci.com, do you have your reading list?
I just posted a summer reading. Yeah, I was really late in writing this summer because I was reading a lot. I'm trying to think other seminal reads. They're all the introspective, a lot of operational stuff, a lot of leadership growth stuff. I mean, Peter Thiel, like 0 to 1. There's some just classics. You read them, and you're just like, oh, what a great framework for decision making that you kind of tuck in your brain and you just apply it moving forward. Okay, cool. How about next question? Anthony, what are you listening to these days? Any favorite podcasts, things you like to listen to? BB King on Spotify. I'm like a very much a hack guitar blues player that I'm just doing this with some of my spare time. What I'm listening to, I listen to Pivot, Galloway and Kara Swisher, which is great. How I Built This. Naval Ravikant's stuff is awesome. He's a great thinker. I read Fred Wilson every day. I didn't mention that. I've been reading Fred Wilson every day for over a decade. Cool. Well, so there's one more podcast. Hold on, I'm blanking on it now. Who else do I? Oh, I mentioned How I Built This. I don't know. Some of it's listed. Some of it's, I just posted about it. But yeah, that's my kind of cue. Okay. Next question. We'll go for about another 5 or 10 more minutes. Next question. How hard do you think it would be to start something like RevZilla or specialty e-commerce today, given this behemoth called Amazon and their dominance? Would you do it? So if there's somebody watching today, like, oh, I'm going to do specialty retail, Amazon. So yeah, they're the great white shark, right? And they've already won all the commodity spaces. Their capital's cheaper than anybody. You're not going to speed price selection. You won't out Amazon the Amazon. So you better be a service business. You better have better gross margins, verticalized to a point. You better have an own marketing channel. How can you create a flywheel of loyalty or recurring revenue with decent gross margins that allows you some semblance of a moat, right? You could just say, be more verticalized. RevZilla today, in the age of Amazon in full dominance mode, cost for acquisition is probably, I don't know if you could do what we did with RevZilla then today. I think cost for acquisition, because there's so much qualified search volume starting on Amazon and skipping Google, you're essentially seeing it's about to be the trio or triopoly, but it's Google, Facebook, advertising duopoly. Now Amazon's probably going to be the number 2 within the next 12 to 18 months. Sure, if not, just from an advertising. But here's the thing. the way they're set up, I just read this is a Galloway from recently, you can't master them. So essentially, because you can't master these platforms or own your own destiny on them, they're just a toll booth. So my advice would be, if you have some, you're going to like this, if you can get to market clever and build your owned marketing channel, which is whether it's a community, whether it's a B2B angle, some way that you can engage your customer base that brings them back to you. For me, I always looked at RevZilla, that was our content. I said, you only need one motorcycle helmet every few years, but how can I get that rider, male or female, to start the day, I hate to say this, like on the toilet with RevZilla? It's because of what we wrote that we're publishing about the industry that's so compelling. That was kind of our hook to bring people back, which is, yeah, when you're ready to buy, hopefully you vote for us with your credit card. But I think you need some service angle, media angle, tech angle that you become useful or entertaining, or else Amazon's just going to eat your lunch.
Right. Okay, and thank you for the shout out he was referring to. He's like, how could we be clever? We had a Dreamit dose out a couple weeks ago out on our YouTube channel on how to be clever on more than one axis. So
I actually wrote a blog post before you posted that. That was in draft and didn't publish it because I was like, it's just going to seem like I'm repackaging Steve. Which I was, because I heard you say it 5 years ago, clever twice. It's huge.
How can you be clever? All right, next question. Just real quick, and then we have 2 more questions and we'll wrap up. Do you think a lot of founders try to raise too much money too early? We kind of hit upon it a little bit already. But
the answer is probably. Yeah. Right? They look at it as a badge of courage or a badge of validation, right? I raised money. Right. It's like, yeah, but you just changed the dynamic of what success looks like. And now you have to figure out how to get to revenue and customers. And then we did talk about earlier, you can sprawl. If you're not really, we had a really tight P&L for a really long time once we got our financial optics on. Right. We knew the inputs and outputs, instead of let's try too many things or hire too quickly and get bloated. Right. Even locally, I've seen other companies that I wasn't formally attached to where you just end up spread across too many things and the master of none. Okay.
No, good to know. And we talk about, sometimes I meet with founders and I said, I'll say to them, if you spent half as much time trying to get revenue from customers as you do raising capital, you'd be in so much better shape. They're constantly trying to meet with investors. It's like, go meet with customers and go close deals, because kind of revenue solves all problems.
Profitable revenue solves all
profitable
problems.
revenue. Yes, correct. Okay, next question is from Arvind, who asks, how do you view, well, we talked about this a little bit, how do you view Amazon as a competitor? I rarely hear entrepreneurs mention Amazon. Were you competing with them in the beginning?
Yes, and we're still competing with them today. And even at the place of scale that, I'll just say, RevZilla now, with stores at scale, the business is huge compared to even what it was when we exited. Without saying too much, I mean, Amazon's the #1 threat. So you look at Amazon, it's like, great. It's like, if they want to come, they're going to come. And they're better capitalized and they can do what Amazon wants to do. So yes, it's in all aspects. I mean, now you're going to see it. And we saw Apple launch a credit card. You're going to watch the InsurTech space. I mean, Amazon has the means to do whatever they want. It's going to be very interesting to see how many places and how many consumer-facing industries they touch over the next 5 to 10.
But not only that, how they're verticalizing, right? So if you're UPS and FedEx, they're like, yeah, not so much anymore. And oh, by the way, we have our own airplanes. And oh, by the way, we want to deliver by drones. And oh, by the way, we own our back-end infrastructures where we really make the money off of AWS. It's so profitable. It's quite the beast. Okay, last question. If there's any last questions beyond this,
send them in. Unless you have to do hard stuff. The Q&A is fun.
I'm good. And then we just have to wrap up. So Danny from New York asks, how do you make the decision to skill up versus hiring people with the experience?
So my framework for it, Danny, that's a great question, is understanding, right, it's like kind of the, am I great at this? Am I okay at it? Or do I suck at it? And then say, right, it's like, right? And then what are the skill sets that we need, right? The way I would look at it is, can I take the things that I might have been a 6, 7, or 8 at, or even a 5 at, and say, how do we get those to all be 8 out of 10s? And then look through the lens of saying the things that have a real cost to the business that I'm sub 5 on, does it make sense to get them back to neutral or to just hire complementary? The other way you might be able to look at that is saying, if you use the cost and risk axis and say, okay, so what are the things that I'm not good at that have a high cost, high risk to them by not being complemented for by a hire? And how quickly do we need those? Do they matter today or will they matter in the future? And then think about, are you going to hire, when are you going to hire for that? I'll tell you, as a bootstrapper, there were certain luxuries that we had, which is, we could say, oh, I'm going to hold on to that for longer. I mean, in hindsight, you might have said there was a cost to holding on to it for longer, but I wanted to learn it. I wanted to do it. If you probably raised money and it's growth and milestones at all costs, there's not a lot of flex in that model. You might think about scaling yourself or hiring yourself out of key roles sooner. I mean, first time CEO starting the business, your death grip on the wheel. It didn't get easier and the business didn't start performing better until we realized that our job was to let go of the wheel. It was the hardest thing as a first-time CEO to do. But what an epiphany when I said, hire as tall as I can and get out of the way.
Right.
And just make sure everybody agrees on what the target is.
Right, and letting go of the wheel. By the way, if you're on a motorcycle, it's bars.
You can't do that. You can do one hand. You can do throttle lock. That's stories for another time.
One hand. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that we have. Anthony, thanks for joining us today.
It was a lot of fun.
No, it's great. A couple things of note, please, for people. If you want to learn more about Anthony, you can check out his LinkedIn profile or check him out on anthonybucci.com. For those of you that want to see future Dreamit lives, please, you can go to our page, dreamit.com/live. You can see upcoming episodes. Follow us on Dreamit, follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, all of our social channels. Check out our Dreamit Dose episodes. They're on YouTube as well. We thank you for tuning in today. Anthony, thank you for spending so much time. Thanks, and have a great day. Take care.